In this video, I'm gonna be talking about the most important basic camera knowledge that you have to know for shooting good videos. Here we go. Hey guys, I'm Max. Welcome to Max Video Creation. So first, I wanna ask you this. Do you wanna know how to shoot better videos on your camera? And do you want to know how? Well, I suppose your answer is yes, since you're watching this video. And if your answer is yes, you're in the right place right now, because by the end of this video you will have the most important basic camera knowledge for shooting good videos, whether it's for professional work or for private videos like travel videos, vlog, and any other videos that you want to leave as memories. So I'm gonna first talk about depth of field, aperture, and f-stop, and then ISO, shutter speed, and FPS. All of these things combined, you get the right look in your footage. And if any of these things are ignored, you can't get that professional and pleasant look that you see in movies and good videos made by professionals. And if you ignore these things, and if you don't know so much about these things, you can't really express what you truly want to express in your videos. So I will explain all these things as simply as I can, and then at the end of this video I will show you how I incorporate them to get the right exposure and the right depth of field for my videos. So make sure to watch this video until the end. Alright, enough of this introduction talk, let's get into it. The first thing on the list, depth of field. Depth of field is a very common term used in photography and videography. It basically determines what is in focus in the frame. Well, to be exact, it is the distance between the closest and the farthest objects in the image that appears to be acceptably sharp. So take a look at this comparison footage. The clip on the left shows what a narrow depth of field looks like, and the right one shows a large depth of field. As you can see here, with the narrow depth of field, only a small area of the image is in focus. And on the other hand, with a large depth of field, you can see more things in focus in the image. To use depth of field effectively for storytelling in your videos, I highly recommend you learn about what a narrow depth of field and a large depth of field affects the mood of the scene. Using a narrow depth of field separates the main subject from the background and the foreground within the image. A narrow depth of field creates something called bokeh, which is the blurred areas of the image. And by utilizing it, you can draw the viewer's attention to the main subjects that are in focus. So here's an example. I'm making coffee and I want the viewer's attention to this glass coffee server thing. And the background would be a distraction in this scene. If I use a larger depth of field, you can't really focus on the glass coffee server thing where the main action, making coffee, is being made. So I used a narrow depth of field for this scene. Using a large depth of field can show more things in the image, which allows viewers to understand what is going on in the scene, leading to more freedom of how the viewers interpret the whole scene. And here's an example. I'm sitting here in nature and I want the viewers to experience what I'm feeling being surrounded by nature. If I use a narrower depth of field and focus only on me, the viewers cannot really embrace the feelings of being surrounded by nature, which is what I want to express in the scene. So I used a large depth of field. Of course, there's more in-depth explanation of depth of field, but for now, you just gotta know what I just told you. And I will make another video focusing only on depth of field in the near future, so make sure to stay tuned. When thinking about depth of field, something called aperture plays a really important role. Aperture is basically the opening of the lens that lets light into the camera sensor. By adjusting aperture, you can adjust the amount of light that comes into the sensor, and you can also adjust depth of field. To utilize aperture properly, you also need to know f-stop, which indicates the aperture. And f-stops are generally written like this: f1.4, f1.8, f2.0, f4.0, f8, f16, and such. And here's what a lot of beginners get confused with. Lower f-stops mean larger apertures, and higher f-stops mean smaller apertures. It's like this. So look at this lens that I have here. Any lenses have their lowest f-stops written somewhere on them. For this lens, it's shown in the front part of the lens, right here. Some zoom lenses have two f-stops written like this, and this means that the lowest f-stops change if you zoom in and out. Anyway, I will show you how aperture and f-stops are related. This is at f1.4, which is the lowest f-stop of this lens, meaning the largest aperture of this lens. And this is at f16, which is the highest f-stop of the lens, meaning the smallest aperture. You see, at f1.4, the lens is wide open, which allows a lot of light to come into the lens, and at f16, the hole of the lens for the light to come in is very small. So now you might be wondering, what do aperture and f-stops have to do with depth of field? The answer is actually quite simple. The larger the aperture is, the narrower the depth of field. And the smaller the aperture is, the larger the depth of field. So another way to simply conclude this correlation is the smaller the f-stops, the narrower the depth of field, and the larger the f-stops, the larger the depth of field. It's pretty simple, right? So now that you understand the relationship between aperture f-stops and depth of field, take a look at the example footage that I used to explain depth of field again. The clip on the left was shot at f1.8, and the clip on the right was shot at f11. So you see the relationship? The smaller the f-stop, the narrower the depth of field, and the larger the f-stop, the larger the depth of field. Now you got the basics of depth of field and its relationship with aperture and f-stops. Moving on to ISO. Before moving on to ISO, please subscribe for more videos about video production in the future and hit the like to support me. Thank you. If you're starting photography or videography, you have probably heard of ISO or ISO. ISO in photography and videography is often referred to as the camera's sensitivity to light. Simply put, it is the camera setting that darkens or brightens the image. The lower the ISO, the darker the image, and the higher the ISO, the brighter the image. And every camera has a different ISO range, and the common ISO set is like this: ISO 100, ISO 200, ISO 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400 and more. And the lowest ISO of the camera is called the base ISO. With that being said, let's take some examples to understand what ISO actually does. So, I explained earlier that ISO brightens or darkens the image. These two clips were shot in a pretty dark room, but when you compare them, the clip on the right is much brighter than the left one. That's because I used a higher ISO for the right one. Then, should we always crank up the ISO whenever it's dark and you want to brighten the image? Not necessarily. Take a closer look at each clip. Do you notice anything else other than the brightness of the image? What's different between these two clips is that the right one with a higher ISO has more digital noise. Since ISO is digitally adjusting the brightness of the image, if you use a higher ISO, you start getting this ugly digital noise that doesn't really look very good in many situations. So you need to be careful what ISO you use in different situations. I personally try to avoid using ISO higher than 1600 or 3200. From around ISO 3200, I start getting this noticeable digital noise that I don't want in most of my videos. But it depends on what camera you use, so you should explore your camera settings and decide yourself. But the rule of thumb is to use the base ISO whenever it's possible. Alright, next up, shutter speed and FPS. First, let me explain what shutter speed is. Shutter speed is the length of time the camera shutter is open to let light into the sensor and capture an image. So the slower the shutter speed is, the more light the sensor gets, and vice versa. And shutter speed is generally indicated like this: 1/50, 1/60, 1/120, 1/240, and so on. So if the shutter speed is 1/50, that means that the shutter is open for the length of 1/50th of a second, meaning that the camera takes 1/50th of a second to capture one image. And shutter speed is most responsible for the motion blur. A slower shutter speed creates more motion blur than a faster shutter speed. So 1/50 has more motion blur than 1/120. In photography, shutter speed is very, very deep and there's so much to explore. Like if you want to get this Milky Way effect, you need to use a slower shutter speed. And if you want to take a picture of a moving object like in sports, you would probably consider using a faster shutter speed. I won't go so much deeper with shutter speed in photography in this video, but I will make another video about shutter speed in the near future. But in videography, there's a rule of thumb, and that's where FPS comes in. FPS stands for frames per second, meaning how many frames the camera captures in 1 second. Generally speaking, any cinematic videos and movies use 24 frames per second, and 30 FPS is used mainly for broadcasting media like TV and news and stuff. And well, some comedy movies used 30 FPS too. And 60 FPS and higher FPS is usually used for sporting events and video game recording, because there's so much going on in 1 second and the camera needs to capture more images in 1 second to make the viewers understand what is going on in the frame. So, what do I mean by the rule of thumb of shutter speed and FPS? You want the shutter speed to be double the number of FPS. If you are recording at 24 FPS, use 1/50 for shutter speed. And if you are recording at 60 FPS, use 1/120 for the shutter speed. Just make sure to stick to this rule, because if you don't stick to it, your footage will look choppy and unnatural. You got it? Okay, so let me get back to it. FPS. I see a lot of beginners make mistake when choosing the right FPS for their videos. Like I said earlier, 24 FPS is the most natural and cinematic to the human eye. And I shoot most of my A-roll videos, which are the main parts of the video, at 24 FPS. And this is currently being shot at 24 FPS, 1/50 for the shutter speed. And when I want to use slow motion in my videos, I use a higher FPS and slow it down to 24 FPS in post-production. So if I use 30 FPS, I get 80% of slow motion, and if I use 60 FPS, I get 40% of slow motion when I slow the footage down to 24 FPS. And each camera has different FPS settings, so your camera might not have 60 FPS, but I suppose that it has 30 FPS. So use 30 FPS and slow it down to 24 frames per second, which gives 80% of slow motion, and that usually works really well. And I use that a lot, but do not slow down the footage slower than 24 FPS unless you're looking for specific effects. And I see a lot of beginners, you slow down the footage that are not meant to be slowed down slower than 24 FPS, if that makes sense. And those videos look really unprofessional and choppy. So don't slow down any videos shot at 30 FPS slower than 80%, and don't slow down 60 FPS videos slower than 40%. So keep that in mind. Alright, it was probably a lot of information for you, but now that you got all this information and knowledge, I will tell you how you can utilize all of them to get the right exposure for your videos. Number one, if you want to brighten your footage, try to adjust the brightness by adjusting aperture first, and try not to adjust it with ISO or shutter speed. Number two, if you want to darken your footage, use the base ISO first and see if that helps. And if it doesn't, use an ND filter, which reduces the amount of light that comes into the lens. Every filmmaker, video creator should own one. And try not to change aperture or shutter speed unless you're looking for specific looks for your videos. And number three, explore your camera settings and practice. Go out for a shoot, or even inside, even at home, shoot some things around you and see what does what and what changes what kind of differences. Practice makes perfect. Okay, now you have it. I'm planning to make more in-depth videos for each of these concepts, so make sure to subscribe and leave a comment if you want me to explain more about any of them. Also, let me know if this video was helpful for you, and if it was helpful, please leave a comment. It was helpful, and that will make me really happy and motivated to make more videos. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you learned something good. See you in the next one. Bye.